Hello and welcome to the second episode of the West Sussex Safer Communities podcast. My name is Scarlett and I'm a project officer within the community safety team at West Sussex County Council. We are launching this podcast to give residents of the county, as well as listeners from further afield, a view into the wide range of work that goes on under the umbrella of community safety. The following episodes were produced in conjunction with the Digital Safety and Fraud Prevention team, whose role is to raise online safety and fraud awareness amongst our communities, businesses and services across West Sussex. In addition to running events and training, the team provide top tips and advice to help us stay safe online and raise awareness of fraud types and how to avoid them. I'm very lucky to be joined today by Lisa from Victim Support.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Mills and I'm a Senior Fraud Manager within Victim Support Sussex. Victim Support is an independent charity which is dedicated to supporting people affected by crime and traumatic incidents in England and Wales. We provide specialist services to help people manage after crime and to empower them to ensure that their voices are heard individually and collectively at a local and national level. In our last episode, we talked about the prevalence of romance and relationship fraud, thinking about who exactly is targeted by fraudsters, the methods they employ, and the impact of this fraud type on victims. So today we are going to put a face to the victims of this horrendous crime using a case study that has been provided to us by a service user at Victim Support.
So first of all, we'd like to thank Yvonne for volunteering to share her story. Your words are a powerful testimony to the resilience of those impacted by romance and relationship fraud. Please note for listeners that this is not the real name of the victim, as they wish to remain anonymous. We would also like to provide a content warning for listeners. Sadly, these stories are not unique, but they do contain content of a disturbing nature, including references to non-fatal strangulation and the early release of a prisoner. If you're personally impacted by anything which we discuss in today's episode, please do contact Victim Support by finding details for your local team on their website. There is also the option of using their live chat function, or you can telephone their 24/7 support line on 0808 1689 111.
So the case we're going to be discussing today comes from a lady called Yvonne. So she's a 68-year-old woman who was defrauded out of $116,000 by a serial fraudster. This was a man who also viciously attacked her, nearly choking Yvonne to death. The fraudster then went on the run and was not taken into custody for 2 years. He was eventually imprisoned, largely thanks to Yvonne's testimony, but was then released just 4 years into a 10-year sentence. Yvonne now fears for her life and is planning to move abroad.
Wow, what an awful experience that must have been, and it sadly doesn't seem to be over for Yvonne. The first thing that strikes me is the huge amount of money that she lost to the fraudster, and also the in-person nature of the crime. So the risk not just to Yvonne's finances, but also to her life. Is this something that is common with romance and relationship fraud?
Not exactly. I mean, one of the key features of romance and relationship fraud is that the victim rarely meets the perpetrator in person. So this is certainly an assumption that people have about this type of crime. But from our experience, unfortunately, cases like Yvonne's are becoming more and more common and represent another way that fraudsters are adapting to becoming even more dangerous. They will often bring other elements into play as a way of grooming their victims to part with more money. So, for example, you may have heard in podcast 1 where I spoke about fraudsters introducing an investment opportunity. There have also been instances where we've seen fraudsters utilising technology to produce fake bank accounts and fake bank balances online so that a victim can look at this and it seems to be a genuine bank account and it may show a large amount of money in there, but the fraudster will claim they're having temporary cash flow issues. But the victim feels like, well, they have £20,000 in there, so of course I will loan them the money. But sadly, this is money that they're never going to see back.
As we talked about in the first episode, it's so important to raise awareness of these kinds of changes in the fraud landscapes. For example, if you meet someone online, but your relationship then moves into an offline space, you might assume that this can't be a case of romance and relationship fraud, because you've been told that classically you don't meet the victim in person. So this could be a really dangerous assumption.
It certainly can be, because we do often hear fraud messaging that advises us not to part with money to someone whom we've never met. But that same advice is still equally as relevant for any new person that we meet. And of course, we can all understand that it does take an appropriate period of time to get to know somebody new and become confident in their genuineness and true intentions towards us. And please keep in mind that it is important to remember that someone with our best interests at heart should never be directing us to keep that friendship or relationship secret, or should be attempting to isolate us from our existing support network. That is a very, very big red flag.
Definitely. So moving on to our case study that Yvonne has very kindly provided us with. She's given us a really detailed account of her experience, so I can't go through absolutely everything in the podcast episode today, but I would like to give a short summary of what happened to Yvonne. So Yvonne says that she first met the fraudster, a car dealer named Terry, about 8 years ago through her ex-husband. Yvonne now believes that Terry had also been grooming her ex-husband for some time. Terry initially groomed Yvonne over a period of a few months. This involved flashing his supposed wealth during visits to her house and suddenly arriving with bags full of shopping for her. At the time, Yvonne was caring 24/7 for vulnerable adults, so was astounded by his kindness. This all-consuming carer role also meant that Yvonne didn't have much time to go online and verify Terry's claims about his lifestyle. This included 2 houses and a boat, which Yvonne later discovered actually belonged to his other victims. Terry then began to tell Yvonne, as well as those around her, that he was in love with her. A few months after getting to know Terry, he began to talk to Yvonne about a business opportunity involving high-end cars. He also insisted that Yvonne would need her own car and claimed that he could provide her with a very good income in return for an investment. Finally, Yvonne was persuaded to register and open a business account in her name. Terry, as her consultant, then took £31,000, claiming that he was finding the right car for her. He continued talking about other investments and, when Yvonne was in a vulnerable state of grief, persuaded her to invest £50,000 and set up a company in her own name through a company's house. On the day of the funeral, she says, I was drugged up on diazepam just to get through it, and he actually took me to the bank so that I could transfer the money. A short time later, Yvonne received an envelope full of newspaper clippings about Terry, including one detailing his 6-year prison sentence for defrauding banks out of £750,000. The anonymous letter also mentioned some other women's names, and while the couple were away for a weekend in the Isle of Wight, Yvonne confronted Terry. She questioned him about the other potential victims and asked him where her money was. Terry then attacked Yvonne, hitting her over the head, strangling her, and dragging her through the house by her neck. Yvonne managed to bite down on his wrist and escape into the bathroom, where she called 999. The police came quickly and managed to arrest Terry, but this wasn't the end for Yvonne. To Yvonne's shock, Terry posted bail and then went on the run. He started to call Yvonne up to 100 times a day. Who knows how many other women he had also been seeing and defrauding out of money, Yvonne said. Who knows who he really is? He robbed and raped all of us, emotionally, mentally, financially. Yvonne and a solicitor went to a local bank and spoke to its fraud department in a bid to get some of her money back. The bank also froze Terry's account. Yvonne also started contacting various police departments to try and keep them focused on tracking Terry down. This went on for a long time, including after Terry was again arrested and again released on bail. By the time Terry was arrested without bail, he'd been on the run for 2 years. By this time, Yvonne was already suffering from PTSD. Then, 2 weeks before Terry's trial, her house was broken into. After ringing up one of the detectives, she learned that another of Terry's victims had then withdrawn her police statement after Terry had love-bombed her from prison. He had obviously paid someone to come and pick my lock and tried to intimidate me, or worse, Yvonne said. Terry eventually pled guilty to numerous counts of assault, fraud, theft, and witness intimidation. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Unfortunately, Yvonne was never completely free of Terry. She then started receiving menacing phone calls, presumably from his associates, resulting in Yvonne feeling unsafe in her own house and having to sell it. Yvonne then discovered that Terry had been released, having served only 4 years of his 10-year sentence. When Terry was first sentenced, Yvonne was contacted by victim support and had Lisa assigned as her caseworker. Unfortunately, because it was regarded as the proceeds of crime, Yvonne was unable to reclaim a large proportion of her money, but the fraud departments of certain banks have helped her retrieve more than £30,000. So that's the end of the short summary that we're going to give of Yvonne's story. And I'm sure listeners can agree that this perspective is absolutely invaluable. It not only demonstrates the signs of romance and relationship fraud, but also shows people that they're not alone. Yvonne gives the advice that victims of crime should always contact victim support. You can't carry all of that around with you, and I don't know how you're going to get through it without some kind of support, she says. She also described the team at victim support as a lifeline, a saviour, and confidants.
I think I have to pay full credit to Yvonne for having the strength not only to report what had happened to her initially, but also to follow the court process through and help secure a conviction against this perpetrator. Cannot underestimate how much strength it took Yvonne to do this. And although she's trying to move on with her life, obviously there are still many challenges ahead for her. We just wish her well, obviously, and thank her for being so open in accepting victim support, engagement and assistance. So in terms of Yvonne and her own words, she would like me to express to everyone today that you should find out as much as you can about the new person in your life straight away. Fraudsters will always target a specific person of means, particularly women, and you can be reeled in very quickly. Such perpetrators will all work to a pattern, so look out for signs that you may be being groomed. They will be very interested in any close family and friends and will slowly start to remove these people from your life. They may start sending you flowers and arrange wonderful dinner dates and so on. They do have the gift of making you feel very special. So with this type of romance or relationship fraud, we have to remember that these criminals, and that's what they are, they're skilled manipulators and they're also abusers because they are causing the greatest of harm to people. And unfortunately, we see this on the front line with our support services across the country, day in and day out. So I would like to provide some telltale signs that the person you're speaking to online might not be who you think you are. So we've mentioned previously a term called love bombing. So what this relates to is an early declaration of love and excessive flattery. So the criminal will really go overboard quite early on in the relationship to make you feel that you're the centre of their world and that you're the only person that matters to them. Likewise, they will ask you to keep the relationship secret and they will make up excuses for not being able to do a video call, for example, or meet in person. They will also at some point ask for money. So it may not be immediately, and it may be that they are playing the long game. And in reality, this is because sadly they are manipulating a number of victims at the same time that they may be speaking to you. So in essence, they can afford to wait to ask you for money. So they will often say that they need cash for a time-critical emergency, for example, to pay an urgent bill, particularly an urgent hospital bill. And in order to do this, once again, it's all about convincing you that you are the centre of their world. So they will use emotive language, saying things like, "But I thought we were in love," or "I really need your help. We have such a special connection." And leading on from that, if you do raise any objections to maybe parting with your money, they will then turn that round onto you and accuse you of not trusting them, and ultimately they will have an answer for any question that you may pose to them. Also, please be wary if anyone asks you to accept money into your account from an unknown third party. So the criminal is most likely trying to use your genuine, legitimate bank account for money laundering purposes. And clearly, we do not want any innocent victim being subjected to an investigation by the police or losing their access to conventional banking facilities. Also, fraudsters will try and obtain key information from you, so sensitive information such as your driving licence or passport, for example. This could then enable them to commit identity fraud against you at a future point. So I appreciate this all seems very scary, but that is the point of our conversation today. We are letting you know the reality of the tactics that fraudsters use. So in terms of meeting people, quite a lot of us will use dating apps, and dating apps have now appreciated, sadly, that these fraudsters can be using their platforms for these criminal purposes. So they have started to enhance their verification features. And I would say it's so important to remain on that app's secure messaging service for as long as possible, because we do often see that fraudsters will try to move you on to other unsecured chat platforms. Moving on to in-person relationship fraud, it can sometimes be more difficult to detect that these individuals have sinister intentions, because purely by the fact that they want to meet you, that might convince you that they are genuine. But it is important overall to acknowledge that if you are the victim of romance or relationship fraud, it is certainly never your fault. And if within a relationship you feel that your partner is taking control of your finances or coercing you into giving them money, what you're experiencing might be the initial signs of financial abuse. So I would urge you to please speak to somebody that you trust or to come forward to victim support. So when we talk about red flags, I'd just like to reinforce the message that when speaking to someone online, the same rules can apply to a new in-person relationship as well. As we've said many times before, if somebody asks you for money and asks you to keep the relationship a secret from your family and friends, then that is a sign that they may not be who they purport to be. Also, watch out for people giving you conflicting information about their life and who they are. If their story keeps changing and doesn't seem to add up, then that's definitely a bad sign. Talk it through with a friend or family member and trust your instincts if you're getting the impression someone isn't genuine. And I'd like to conclude by saying once again that becoming a victim of fraud is never your fault. And there is support out there for you, so please come forward to victim support.